And welcome to episode 102. Sounds like the Zoom meeting struggled a little bit to get going there, but welcome to episode 102 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the nighttime sky, and this podcast is for anyone else who likes going out under the stars. And hard to believe, we actually are almost like more into astronomy than ever, and we have more notes and more information coming from listeners than we ever had, which is really awesome. We're getting into this about a year now, and seems like we have more ideas and more show notes than we can possibly get out the door. But how was your week, Shane? I think you were off this week.
Yeah, I was on vacation, so that was really nice. I was able to observe 3 different days, 2 daytime sessions, 1 nighttime.
Yeah,
and all 3 were actually quite good, quite enjoyable.
Wow.
How was your week?
It was good. It really warmed up on Friday. I went out for a walk in the early afternoon, and it was, I think it was around 20 degrees Celsius here, which is pretty wild for Saskatchewan. Like basically, I think that was the day before the first day of spring. So that is almost unheard of. I can't recall it ever being 20 degrees here on a winter day, like literally the last day of winter, but still 20 degrees. Is that a record here, Shane?
I don't know if Regina set a record, but 3 or 4 places in the province set records for the hottest day ever recorded. Yeah, or for the hottest, March 18th or whatever that was.
Yeah. It's the weather here is extremely interesting. It really is, because I've experienced in the summer, I've experienced negative single digits. Like I've been down to -3 in the middle of summer. Dog days of summer, I've been at -3 in the summer doing observing. And, here we are in a winter's day, +20. Not many places are you going to experience those kind of extremes in the run of the year. And I was thinking last night, I was out for a walk, and this is like the first time I was kind of walking through one of the fields in the conservation area near my home, and the ground was getting soft. And I said to my wife, I said, "Ooh, the ground's getting soft." And she says, "Probably still frozen down there somewhere." And I remembered I went observing in May one year. It's like the 1st of May. And it had been one of those brutally cold winters. I think sort of that we give this year a run for the money, but it hit it, the cold weather had extended into April. And I went camping, and it was warm. It wasn't like hot, but it was like, mid-teens, 15, 16 degrees Celsius. And, at night it was supposed to go down to like 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. And when I crawled into my sleeping bag that night, my temperature gauge was reading -4 outside my tent. The only thing I could think of was that what had happened was, I think the ground was still frozen, because I get into my tent, and although during the day, like with the sun up, the ground felt like cool, but it didn't feel unusually cool. And then at night, I put my hand down on the floor of my tent, like it felt like the floor of my tent was probably -10. So I think the ground was still frozen.
Wow.
Good stuff. So what did you observe? What did you observe this week?
Well, I had I'll do the nighttime session first. It was Friday night, and my goal was to look at some double stars. I had sent out some tweets about the double stars that I was observing that night. The seeing on Friday was outstanding. Probably the best seeing that we've had since sometime last year. First target was Sirius, because the seeing was so good, and because it's starting to get if you wait too long past sunset, it's starting to recede in the sky, actually. So the seeing, like I say, was phenomenal. I was able to use 285 times on the TAC 76 Q. So that's almost 100 times per inch of aperture, which is pretty outstanding. But still, I was unable to see Sirius B. There was at one point, so I was using the drift method again, where I would let Sirius just drift from one side of the eyepiece all the way to the other side, and then hoping to catch it at some point during that transition or during that drift. But really, the key moment is just when Sirius passes the field stop, and and then you lose some of the glare, and then you hope to catch a glimpse of Sirius B. And there was at one point I thought I saw it, but I couldn't repeat it. So due to that, I'm not confident that I actually saw it, because there's so much light that bounces around with the kind of the flare or the glare of Sirius, that it's hard to say. So I don't want to say that I saw it, but it was interesting to try nonetheless. But I went up to Cancer, and I'm using the RASC double star list as kind of my guide right now. Figured I'd just start working through that in the backyard. So what I found, at least for the stars that I looked at that night, pretty easy splits, not too challenging at all. There's 7.5, 6.46, very easy split using a 40 millimeter eyepiece. Both appeared fairly like white stars to me. Primary was a little bit brighter. I did 3.395 as well as 7.3668. Both were very easy to find, very easy to split. The separation on them, I don't know what the separation is.
What are these? Shane, what are these numbers? Are they Struve numbers?
Let's just see here. No, I don't believe they're Struve. One here is so 3.395 is HR. The 7.5.646 is HD. The 7.3.668, I think that's HD as well. And that's in Hydra, not in Cancer.
So these are just, okay. So those are the catalog designations. Cool.
Yeah. I'm not sure of the separation, because again, the list that the RASC provides is kind of, in my opinion, missing some detail. Like it doesn't have the separation, which is kind of odd. But anyway, regardless, I also split, I think it's Tegmen, Tegmen, a named star in Cancer. And that was the funnest one of the night, because it was a little bit closer. The two were they're 5.5 arc seconds apart. So the 40 millimeter in the TAC 76Q, slight detection of the double, but I did need power to split it. So at 40 millimeter, it looked like kind of almost like an ovalish. You could tell that there was more than just one point of light there, but I couldn't see blackness between the 2 points of light. So then I used a 12 millimeter ortho, and that split the star. And like I say, that was the funnest one. But then after my session, I discovered that there's a third star that's a part of that system that I didn't observe. And it's 1.1 arc seconds away, I think, from the companion star. So, a little bit of a lesson learned. I probably should have just used more magnification to see, what was really there. But, again, this is something that I would kind of look for in a list, to indicate that there's 3 stars that are observable, or there's 5 stars in this system, or whatever it might be. So, again, I'm a little frustrated with this list, because it just is lacking some key information.
Yeah, well, take notes. I mean, the list is still new, and Blake, the person who came up with the list. I mean, my advice was to run the list as a bit of a pilot first. And then after people do it, you kind of get the feedback, then you make your edits, and then you make it a certificate. But I don't know why everybody wants their list to be a certificate. Sort of, no offense to anybody, but I'm not really sure why that is. That like, in fact, people have asked me to make one or more of my lists certificates as well, or if I wanted them to be certificates, maybe put properly. I always say no. Do not do that. Do not make my list a certificate, because once you do that, the problem that you run into is that it's much more difficult to make changes to a list that's become a certificate. So, for example, if now they go back and say, well, you should make that extra star an observation in order to complete that list, then, well, what do you do with people that didn't make the observation and didn't find that out? Or, it becomes really difficult, and then you have to sort of rework everything. But if you just kind of make it like an informal list, and then and then people go and observe it, and then, later on you can award the certificate once you kind of work the bugs out. Because until like enough people observe it, it's difficult. Like with one of my lists, which is called it's called Wide Field Wonders, Deep Sky Wonders, being the Walter Scott Houston book, which I love and pay homage to in that list. Even still today, I'll get emails from people like, oh yeah, well that I should have that note in there, or this should be more clear, or maybe the object should be called something else. And I'm totally open to making those changes. It's really easy and it's great. So observers will be working on the list and they'll write me a question or a comment or something. And yeah, no problem. I can go make the change. But if it was a certificate, I'd have to go through a committee and get a rubber stamp and, anyway. I could go on. That's in some ways why, although I think it's worthwhile to have observing projects. I shy away from calling anything a list. I like to have a project versus just a list, because I think when we try to distill things down into just a list, so to speak, then like you're finding, details get lost, right?
Yeah, very true. Very true. What I may start doing actually, just in my double star pursuit, because again, easy to observe from a light polluted backyard, is just pick a prominent constellation that's in the southern sky, and then open the Pocket Sky Atlas to that constellation, and then just observe every double star that the Pocket Sky Atlas lists, because most of those stars, like, I don't think it goes beyond magnitude 9, maybe is my guess, maybe somewhere around there. So they should all be visible within a small, like my modest telescope. Now some of them might be too close for me to split, but that's another way to approach it. Just toss the list out and just enjoy observing.
If I were you, like, I'm not as, I've become, thanks to you, I've become not a double star observer, but somebody who appreciates them, and I'll go and observe them from time to time now. So I appreciate that. But, I couldn't recommend strongly taking that volume 2 of Webb's Celestial Handbook. And honestly, like, I would just take your copy and then just, open it, because this is what it's designed for. And then you just open it to that constellation, and then you just work your way through that. And then it would be cool. Like, you could just write your notes right in the pages. Like, that would be, that would be a really, really great way to observe a lot of double stars, because he went through them all that were known into the late 1800s, and he was using a 90 millimeter telescope ish. Which I think with modern coatings and eyepieces and diagonals and stuff, your 76 millimeter is going to be pretty comparable too. So anyway, it's not like in a whole different league of a telescope, really. So I think you might have a lot of surprising enjoyment from doing that. But anyway, that would just be sort of an aside recommendation. So yeah. So what else?
So 2 solar observing sessions. Oh, you know what? I did look at Mars on Friday night as well. One final passing. It was just too low in the sky, and it's so small now. It really was hard to discern any detail. I felt like there's maybe a little bit of white from one of the. Trying to think now. I think it was the northern cap potentially. But it was flaring.
Yeah, I can't recall which one.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my last parting shot for Mars. And I guess a frustration with that Takahashi. The Leica zoom eyepiece that I have, I wanted a comfortable, easygoing session. So I just wanted to use the zoom. So I'm not messing around, with different eyepieces. And, to get the Leica to focus, I have to remove one of the adapters on the Takahashi focuser so that I get more inward travel to bring the Leica to focus. But then when I do that, I don't have enough back travel for the 24 millimeter panoptic to focus. So it drives me a little nuts that the draw tube is so short on that thing. But anyway, I digress. It was a fun session, and I think that's all I looked at that night. Yeah, I think that was it. And then 2 solar sessions with the Hydrogen Alpha telescope. And these are really, really fun sessions. The first one, so what I use all of the time is it's a Nikon zoom with my Hydrogen Alpha. Hydrogen Alpha is maybe one of the most finicky, or can be one of the most frustrating observing sessions that you could have, because like the seeing is constantly fluctuating during the day because of all of the heating. So you're usually, adjusting focal length to accommodate, the seeing that's happening. And then, if you get any little bit of cloud or whatever, it can mess things up. But what I've done is I've used a Nikon zoom. I think it's like an MC2 or something like that. It has a focal length range of 9mm to 21mm. So it's ideal for my H-alpha telescope. I can dial in kind of the perfect focal length based on the seeing that happens that day. And this eyepiece is renowned for providing ortholeg views. It's, sort of not a lot of people use it, but if you look on cloudy nights, it receives extremely good reviews, and I can concur that it's a well-performing eyepiece. It's always done well on the Hydrogen Alpha. But Hydrogen Alpha is also very finicky with complex eyepieces with a lot of glass elements. But the Nikon always seemed to be kind of exempt from that rule. It always, gave me good views. But my first solar session this week, I thought I'll try the TMB Super Monos, because I haven't used those yet on the sun with my Hydrogen Alpha. So I couldn't believe it when I put the TMB Super Mono in there. Like the difference, like it was a much better view, but it wasn't like a subtle increase in the improvement. It was a substantial improvement. And, it just kind of affirmed that complex eyepieces and Hydrogen Alpha just aren't always the best mix. I even put my, so I compared a 9mm TMB, a 9mm Delight, and then this Nikon zoom at 9mm. And there really was no competition. The TMB blew it away for sharpness and contrast and all of that stuff that you look for when doing Hydrogen Alpha observing. So there were lots of prominences, things coming off the limb of the sun. Looks like little flamey things or sort of eruptions. There had to be close to 10, probably with 3 or 4 really large prominent ones. So anyway, had a blast observing the sun that day. The following day, observed the sun again. And this time I decided to drop in a 20mm Kellner Vixen eyepiece, 0.965 barrel. And that bested every eyepiece I own. And I remember reading like 15 years ago, probably, that some solar observers really recommended Kellner eyepieces, that for whatever reason, they just seem to work really well on the sun. And man, that 20mm Vixen, I've never seen the sun look that amazing. The surface detail was incredible. Faculae were, there's a real bright faculae on the, I guess it would be on the eastern side of the sun. There were some 2 dark filaments right in the middle, which are prominences directed at Earth, basically. It was just an amazing solar observing session. And that 20mm Vixen Kellner, I've never used before on anything. I just actually acquired that a couple of weeks ago. So now I'm kind of curious to see how it does under a night sky, because I was really impressed with it on the sun. Eye relief was nice. Everything was nice. I couldn't say anything bad about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my long-winded observing report for the week, and hoping to get a little, well, this week's not looking very good for us, but.
No. And so I'm taking off, I guess, a couple weeks from now. I'm not really going anywhere. If I do go anywhere, it'd be fairly local. And yeah, I'm hoping for some clear skies once this moon is out of the night sky. And anyway, looking forward to that. So I really had kind of hoped to take this past week off. That was kind of originally what I thought I might do, but because I'm teaching my astronomy course, then I also teach at the university for a science study that I work on. Yeah, it's not realistic for me to try to take those weeks off when I'm teaching. That's just not gonna fly that well. So then I try to have to line up when I'm not teaching with the new moon, and then try to take that time off. So anyway, it's not too bad. So, but speaking of the moon and my class, so there's an individual who's taken my class a few times before. He's not in my class now, but one of the things I like the most about teaching the classes is all the amazing people I get to meet, and that's not an understatement at all. And this individual, he actually has taken like full-on bona fide university astronomy classes, and is into photographing and observing the moon, which I'm not into as much. But I do enjoy making lunar observations, or if there's something interesting to see, particularly naked eye, I'm super interested in that. But anyway, I went out for a walk, came home, didn't notice or think of anything unusual. I was home for about an hour and a half, and just happened to check my email, and he'd sent me this email saying, "Hey, there's a halo around the moon. Have you ever seen this before? Like, what is this?" So I kind of went out, and at first I was like, well, the moon just kind of looks like there's a bit of haze around it. But then kind of after I sort of quasi-dark adapted in my brightly light polluted backyard, I was like, oh no, there's this huge faint halo around the moon. And I think I sent you a text or something. And did you see it?
Yeah. Well, I think I did. Like, I went out about half an hour later with my dog, and there was there was a thin veil of cloud up there,
Yeah.
and that kind of created a bit of a halo effect, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it was like about 22 degrees off the moon. This is what it was, this lunar halo phenomena. So it's kind of far out from the moon, say 2 fist lengths. And then, and it was faint, brighter in the north. And then there were some other spots that were bright. But when I first walked out and looked up, and it was almost like right overhead, I was looking more towards the south, and because the northern part was sort of obscured by my house roof line. And so then kind of when I went out into the yard, I was like, oh, I can clearly see it now. But good eye on that individual for calling it out, and then for reaching out and getting in touch. I was able to write him back and say, yeah, I've seen this a few times before, and I think maybe 3 or 4 times before. That was, I think, one of the fainter ones that I've seen, but he actually took some photos. Did I send you the photo of it?
No, I don't think so.
He's working on a better photo. He's a very good photographer. In fact, I have like a shrine to the moon in my office, a vintage lunar poster, a vintage lunar globe, and then I have this beautiful photo that he actually took and gifted me on my wall. So it's the only thing on my wall in this room other than my Mars map. So anyway, that's cool. That was sort of a neat thing to see last night. And of course, this is unaided eye, not using binoculars or a telescope or anything. And then the other thing I've been observing, unaided eye, is the belt of Venus in the morning sky. And so what this is it's this sort of purpley, pinky band that's opposite the sun. So the sun is rising in the east, and then if you go out and look to the west, and you have a reasonably good horizon, it doesn't need to be like a spectacular horizon, but it needs to be a reasonably good horizon, you can actually see this band kind of setting. And the opposite occurs in the evening sky, where the sun is setting in the west, and then if you look to the east, east-ish, sort of exact opposite the sun. These days, being around the solstice, it is exact west in the morning and east in the evening, where this phenomenon occurs. And what this is just the Earth's shadow being extended out into space, and kind of as that shadow projects sort of from the Earth into space, you can see it cutting through the atmosphere at this time of day, just because their angle is just right to it. And that's super easy to see from Saskatchewan because it's so flat here. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always enjoy seeing that, just the nice colors in the sky. Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
And then I've been doing a little bit of binocular observing. I was out looking at the moon and the Pleiades, the Hyades, and Orion. And I've got a pair of these Nikon 7x35 Action Extremes, and I've always really liked them. They're one of my favorite binoculars because I think they have great light throughput. They were pretty inexpensive. When I bought them, they were on sale for like $120 Canadian. And I think they're about the widest field binocular that you can get and use with glasses that are reasonably affordable. And a number of years ago, I had bought a pair of sort of ultra wide binoculars that you can't use with glasses, but they're very, very wide. They arrived out of alignment, and then sort of in subsequent research, I found out that the ones that I'd bought, which are a department store brand called Montgomery Ward, which I really never heard of before, but they were from the States. It's sort of unfortunate. The binoculars came, they're in mint condition, absolutely perfect, but one of the prisms is out of alignment. So I've always meant to kind of send them to an optical repair shop, but kind of after I did more digging and research after I received those, I came to realize that that maybe these weren't the best ones anyway, and that I would try to seek out a slightly better pair. And then this past week, I should say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody had a pair of, they're called a Cardinal model 287 7x35 up on eBay, and I kind of waited it out and did some bidding, and I happily bought them for about $82 American, which is really exciting because typically these can go for as much as $300 American.
Yeah, that's a great price.
So why go with these old binoculars when I have a really good pair of relatively recent binoculars? Well, one is that these older binoculars have these huge fields of view. So I'd read about them quite a bit, and then when I was visiting my folks, they happened to just receive as like a random gift a pair of these ultra wide binoculars that are pretty vintage, and not like the best ones, but a good example of a good pair. And I had a lot of fun with those one night. I thought, well, it'd be nice to get one that's just a little wider than those, even in higher quality. So it's kind of what I've been seeking now. You have to use them without your eyeglasses on, which for me isn't great because I'm an eyeglasses wearer. But I thought if I could ever find a pair of these for a reasonable amount of money, then it's worth doing. So I thought, well, if I can get these for under $100 American, I'm gonna do it. So I did it, and we'll see if they're in alignment when they arrive here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's exciting. Those old binoculars can be pretty amazing with the wide field. I've dabbled a little bit, and the edge of the field is often fuzzy, which drives me a little nuts. So I'm very curious to see how these ones perform.
Yeah, so these ones, the Cardinal 287 are the exact copy or twin of one called a Sears. I think it's like a 6287-A, and they say they have a 12.5 degree field, although apparently the field is actually about half a degree smaller, and reports say that about the inner 50 or 60% is extremely sharp, and then it does fall off. But they say the edge on these ones is just like okay, like it's okay. But anyway, we'll see when they arrive. I kind of figured for essentially $100 Canadian, it's worth giving a try. And then I thought if they do need some work, or I really like them, they're a bit dinged up. So I think that $300 would have been too high a price to pay for them, and I actually think $200 probably would be a little bit high too. But if they are good and need alignment, I'm going to send them in. But if they're in alignment and they work well, I might send them in anyway with the other pair, get the other pair aligned, and get these ones kind of cleaned up. And I just thought they'd be fun to have when we're kind of out at grasslands and sitting around and observing, and just kind of a fun set of toys. The other ones I have are supposed to be 11.8 degrees, although I don't think they're quite that. They seem more like 10.5 degrees to me. They don't seem that much wider than my Nikons, and I'm not sure I would get a 10.5 degree over my Nikons. But 12 degrees is, I mean, 3 degrees is a fair bit of field in a binocular. on top of another pair. So anyway, these ones are kind of supposed to be the best. So if I don't like these, then I think my exploration into vintage binoculars has come to a conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. I bought I think in the fall actually. I bought a pair of Town and Country. So similar, like these are really old. Town
Yeah.
and Country 7x35s. I think they have like a 10 or a 10.5 degree field of view.
Yep.
But the reason I bought them is on cloudy nights. You and I talk about Bill Paoloni a lot as kind of the eyepiece guru. Well, on the old binocular side, I think Martin Pond is kind of the equivalent, right? He's the guru of old binoculars, or seems like he's used a lot and provides some really good information. His favorite of all of them is these Town and Country 7x35s.
Okay.
So the ones that I have, they're in pretty good shape. Like they're not mint by any stretch, but the glass is good. But like you said, the eye relief not so good. And even with these ones, the edges are still, not as nice as I would like them to be. I haven't used them a heck of a lot. So next time we go under a dark sky, I'll bring them out and give them a test and see how they do.
Yeah, I guess like one thing that I sort of have in mind, and it can be difficult to throw too much in the car, but kind of in my mind, like both these binoculars I paid around, like I think the Wards I only paid like $40 for. I'm not sure why people didn't want them, because they are in absolute perfect condition except for the alignment. And I think that can be easily done. Probably somebody who's more mechanically inclined than I am could easily do it. But I think I'm going to send them off when I send these ones off. And then, I kind of think, well, these ones gained for $80. Well, I can kind of just throw them in the car somewhere. I kind of got to get storage set up better in my car, and not really a big deal. Just kind of leave them in here, even with our heat and cold. I'm like, well, they're only $80 binoculars, and then we get down to the grasslands. Sometimes we get those nights, and it can be good for doing binocular observing, but sometimes we get nights where you can't really set up telescopes for one reason or another. Like most nights down there do clear, but sometimes we'll get down there and be a rainstorm, and then it clears off and it's great, but you get a lot of mist and dew. You set up a telescope and it fogs over in like 15 minutes. And, that does happen usually once a year. And then we just sit there and play with binoculars. And I thought, well, this would be a fun thing to have is several sets of these pretty good vintage binoculars just for fun. We're not doing anything scientific or sort of observing project oriented. It's just sort of a fun thing in itself to scan around with. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Nice little thing to play around with.
Yeah. Hey, so did you buy the 30 millimeter ultra flat field from APM or others?
No, I haven't. If I ever buy that, it's probably a ways into the future. That is not an eyepiece that I need right now, and I want a Berleback tripod. I'm probably buying a used Bino viewer here very soon. So I've got some other places for my money at this time. And the 30 millimeter just is not, on the short list right now. But I'm intrigued by it because it's so light. And I love my 31 millimeter Nagler, but it's one of the heaviest eyepieces you can buy. And in some applications, that doesn't matter. But sometimes it does, and sometimes it's nice just to have a lighter option.
Yeah, that's why, and I have for my ultra wide field low power eyepiece, I have a Pentax 40 millimeter XW, and it weighs about 2 pounds. I think the Nagler is at least half a pound or a pound heavier than that still. And even that eyepiece, it's just deadly some nights. And I'm just like, if I put that in, it's kind of like that's the eyepiece I'm using because I have to rebalance. So a lot of the time I end up using my old Widescan 3, which is just a basic Koenig, and I bought it used off a friend of mine. It's just a really good, decent wide field eyepiece. I think to my eye, a lot of people don't like them, but I do like it. So I've been thinking about getting the Masuyama 32 millimeter. Because it's just an updated version of that. And, a lot of people don't like them because they don't focus well in faster telescopes like F5 or so. But honestly, I use my Widescan 3 all the time in my 80 millimeter F5. That's like the eyepiece I use in there. And then I also use it all the time in my F6 scopes. And I'm totally happy with it. So for me, it's a great eyepiece. The next person is going to hate that eyepiece. So just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Hey, so we got a question from Phil.
Yeah.
Do you want, we actually have that and an observing report. Who wants to read? Do you want me to read Phil's? Because the other one's on double stars, and I always feel like you know more about double stars than I do. So, but anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So Phil asks a question. This is Phil from the UK, longtime listener, frequent correspondent. Really, really great to hear from him. I thought it was a pretty good question. So he asked, what we often will get the question, or people will be asking, what telescopes should they get to observe deep sky objects? Which he kind of put in his question that often it's like an 8-inch Dob, but yeah, I mean, even 10, 12, you'll see people get 16-inch Dobs these days because they're much more affordable than they used to be. And indeed, like, no sponsorship or affiliation here, but, those Skywatcher Dobs in all those sizes are just awesome telescopes. I've looked through a huge selection of them. They're all excellent. And, you can spend an awful lot on a reflector, and certainly it's cool when people do, but just to get the mass produced ones from Skywatcher for such great prices these days is quite astounding. But then he kind of expands and says, like, what instrument would be a good instrument for planetary detail and lunar observing for a lowish to medium high budget? And now, I guess it depends on what somebody calls a low or high budget. There was somebody that joined the club once that was into buying sailboats or power boats or something. So when we told them that, that eyepiece is like $300, it's quite a bit, they kind of laughed and went, well, I spent that just on, getting my boat clean last week or something, right? So all depends on what somebody calls a high or low budget. But I guess when it comes to telescopes, I'm going to say like a medium to high budget is somewhere maybe like around $500 or $600, Shane. Sound about right?
Yeah. I think if we go under 500 is low, 500 to 1,000, maybe in the middle. And then, anything over 1,000 we can say is high. Yeah.
So probably my recommendation would be something like a 5 or a 6-inch Maksutov Cassegrain. And there's good I think Skywatcher makes a really good 5-inch, and I think they come on a pretty good mount. And I think honestly for lunar and planetary, like sort of as a very focused recommendation, I think that's a good recommendation. Recently my friend Randall sent me photos, and what he did is he bought a 5-inch and he wrapped it in this like insulating material, and there's instructions on Cloudy Nights on how to do this, and he's gotten excellent results taking it from inside his home, which was like 20 degrees Celsius, outside down to -13, he said it, and it was extremely stable, because I know in the past that the stability on those instruments can be problematic, and I own a 6-inch Maksutov and have experienced that. So I think kind of with that in mind, and now he did a very good job, and I think the instructions for the 5-inch Maksutovs, like the ones from Skywatcher or Orion Telescope and Binocular, you get one of those. Usually you can get it with a pretty good mount option, and then you wrap it up. Now, if you already have a mount, you might want to go for some sort of refractor or something. So that's if you're buying new. If you're buying new, I'm going to say don't buy like a mass-produced Maksutov used. Maybe I'd be a little bit concerned, because sometimes the meniscus, there's a meniscus lens on the front, and sometimes they glue on the secondary on the back of that. And if someone's kind of left it in their car when it's been too hot, I've heard of the glue kind of releasing. So that's something to watch out for. But if you do have like a slightly higher budget and you already own a mount, and typically you're going to want some sort of tracking mount, I really think some of those older Takahashis, like the FCT versions, like I've seen 100mm tacks go for, in that low thousand, say like $1,000 American range on different sites, older ones. And they come in a variety of focal lengths. The one that I really am attracted to, and kind of like if I had all the money in the world and maybe didn't already own a 100 millimeter Takahashi, would be the 100 millimeter f6.4. I think that is just a really beautiful combination of size, focal length f6.4. You're going to get ultra wide fields. You're going to get a beautiful planetary instrument. But sort of barring that, if you do have just a slightly larger budget still, my telescope that I've bought for doing this is the Takahashi 100 DC. And I think that's probably the best instrument I've ever used to look at planets with. It comes with a good reputation. I was a little bit on the fence for several years about buying it, and finally took the plunge. It went on sale. I forget what it was. It was a good sale though. It was like, what was it, like 30% off or something, Shane, or 20% off? It was a good sale.
Oh, that much? I thought it was like 5 or 10, but I don't really remember.
Yeah, well, once it was all said and done. Anyway, Stefan, who I bought the telescope from, and I've bought lots of stuff from him in the past, he worked out a really good deal. Whatever it was, you can sort of wait it out and get a good deal. And for $1 per quality ratio, that is I think a bargain. Like how good that telescope is for the price, being well under $2,000 Canadian. So, but anyway, everybody's mileage varies. And Shane, what would you recommend for a sort of a low and medium and high budget for a dedicated planetary lunar scope?
Well, I think maybe what I'll start off with here is, any telescope, I think, in my opinion, is good for all of that stuff: planetary, lunar, deep sky observing. Now, if you want to do all of that, I would say probably don't go smaller than 3 inches. My little 50 millimeter Borg is a nice little telescope, but you're not going to see much planetary detail. And I don't think you really start to see planetary detail until you hit at least 3 inches of aperture or more. So that's kind of one criteria. But I think the other one that I'll say is the most important is get a telescope that you're going to use a lot, and then adapt your observing to that telescope. So for example, my 76 millimeter TAC is what I use all of the time, but I'm not going to go galaxy hunting with that. It's not going to be great at that style of observing, but it will be awesome for the planets, like open clusters in particular, wide field stuff. There's a lot of things I can do with that telescope. So to me, it's all about adapting to the telescope that you have and get one that you'll use a lot. The reason I no longer have a 12-inch light bridge is because I would use it once or twice a year, because it was big, it was a pain to set up, it was a pain to haul, and I just didn't use it. There was, I had other telescopes in my repertoire that I used way more. So, consider the size, consider the effort to set it up, consider the alignment if you're getting any kind of go-to telescope. All of these factors have to be considered. And sometimes it's hard to know until you actually, use one of these things. It may seem like a 12-inch, Dob is not an issue to use, but maybe once you start lifting the 40 or 50 pound lower tube assembly, you might change your mind. So, as far as recommending a particular telescope, maybe to me, one of the better values out there is the Skywatcher 100 ED. I think it comes in around $1,000. And I think that's like a 4-inch is, the ideal aperture. It sort of does everything. Lower or cheaper telescopes. I'm a big fan of the older ones, as everybody knows. Your Maksutov recommendation is a good one. I looked through multiple times. I've looked through a 6-inch Celestron SE Cassegrain. Phenomenal little telescope. Like, I couldn't believe what it would show in terms of planetary detail and deep sky stuff. It really surprised me. I think they're fantastic little telescopes.
And I think that comes with like computerized tracking and that sort of thing. Not that we're that into the computerized portion of it, but certainly the tracking would be really nice to have. But yeah, that's a really good recommendation. It's like 6 inches is going to give you lots of resolution and lots of light gathering power for looking at the planets. Like you'll really start to see detail on Mars next time it comes around here in another 18 or 19 months. And yeah, you'll really see detail on Jupiter. Should easily be able to see the red spot. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Shane, I feel like we should have sound for this. Or do you have anything else anything else to add to the question from Phil?
No, that's everything.
All right. Because we're getting these observing reports and I really love these. I love reading them. It was sort of like it's been sort of like an unexpected regular feature in sort of what we call episode 1 each week. And we've got this great observing report from Neil. And I believe Neil is from the UK as well.
Yeah. I can't remember where Neil's from, but that sounds right. Yeah. So the email we received was the subject was Theta Aurigae, and then podcast 101. Hi guys, it's quite a coincidence, but as episode 101 was released, I was planning to observe a double star in Aurigae on Thursday, March 18th. I didn't listen to the podcast until Friday morning, so it was quite by chance. But it wasn't one of the three you mentioned. It was Theta Aurigae. And I had seen a discussion on Stargazer's Lounge about this multiple star and how it was a little tricky to find the closest secondary star. It has 4 components. And then this is, I think, what does he have here? And from an anthology of visual double stars by B. Argyle, M. Swan, and A. James. So there's 4 components. The primary is magnitude 2.7. The secondary is 7.2, and then the other 2 are 11.1 and 10.1. So the last 2 are fairly dim. So anyway, I'll go on to read Neil's email. The B star is much fainter than the main star and close to less than 4 arc seconds, which should make it hard to observe. But as luck would have it, I picked a night of very good seeing and found it relatively easily. Using my 8-inch Dob and Baader Hyperion zoom eyepiece, I located the star, and when I zoomed in, it popped into view quite clearly. At 8 millimeters, which is 150 times magnification, it was obvious. Here's a sketch using a 7 millimeter University Optics Ortho with 170 times magnification. And the sketch was quite good. It was neat to see. I liked how he captured the stars. Like, it really, to me, mimicked the view that you'd see through the telescope. Like, they weren't just perfect really pinpoints.
Like if Neil, if you get a chance and you're listening to this, hopefully you are, and I didn't reply, maybe I should have. But yeah, I was really curious about his technique for doing those sketches. I just thought it was very beautiful and well rendered.
Yeah, agreed. And I like the zoom eyepiece mention, especially with double stars. A zoom eyepiece is so nice because while you're hunting for the double star, you have it zoomed to the longest focal length, so you have the widest field of view. But then once you find it, you just rotate or twist your eyepiece to increase the magnification until you can make your split, and it just saves you from having to swap eyepieces in and out. So zoom eyepieces definitely have a place, especially if you're into double stars.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so that's Neil's observing report, and I don't know if we have anything else to talk about. Is there anything on the list?
I think that's just about covered it. We got through a lot there in this episode, and well, thanks so much, Shane.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.